for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick podcast, your #1 sports destination.
Giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props, or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K,
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 S-I-C-K.
S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. With Tony Marinaro.
55 seconds left in the penalty, a minute and 27 seconds left in regulation time. Boston 4, Montreal 3. Lafleur coming out rather gingerly on the right side. He gives it into Lemaire, back to Lafleur. Oh!
The sickest Montreal Canadiens podcast.
You're in the ball!
Sports entertainment like no other.
Rejoint, on lui fait perdre la rondelle, une passe devant. Et c'est le dégagement, et ce sera la victoire des Canadiens. Coupe Stanley pour les Canadiens. Le 23e de l'histoire.
You found the dogs! John, you found the dogs! He found the dogs! And all together, they worked a young team to the top. And now, a 24th Stanley Cup banner will hang from the rafters of the famous Forum in Montreal. The Canadiens win the Stanley Cup.
Brought to you by Energy Transportation Group. Driven to be different. La Vida TV. Embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination. It's gonna be sick.
Podcast on this Wednesday, July 3rd. I hope everyone is well. And once again, the Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, a leading full-service logistics provider serving all of North America. Driven to be different. It's also brought to you by Bittt Tibi. They launched their new Ultra Lager. It's a refreshing, thirst-quenching beer, perfect for the hot summer days with only 90 calories. 2 grams of carbs and 4% ABV per can, available in a pack of 6 and 12 in grocery stores all around the province of Quebec. Ultra light. It's ultra refreshing. Also brought to you in part by Playground. Play lucky numbers at Playground. Earn your entries daily and return every Sunday for a chance to win a share of the $15,000 cash prize with a $5,000 top prize. And on July 28th, one lucky winner will take home $10,000 at the $30,000 finale. Visit playground.ca for details. And we want to thank all of our partners and all of our sponsors. We also want to thank Betway. It's because of them that we're able to make our way to Las Vegas for our NHL Draft Coverage 2024. It was presented by Betway. They're a leading global online betting and gaming brand. Follow your gut instinct. Go with Betway. Go on betway.com or scan the QR code to join the action. Must be 18 and over and play responsibly. The NHL Draft was last week on Friday and on Saturday. Free agency opened up on Monday. It's been an extremely past couple of days. One guy who's been around a draft or two and a free agency or two, he needs no introduction. He is, of course, Pierre McGuire of the Sick Podcast, The Eye Test, and former Stanley Cup winning assistant coach with the Pittsburgh Penguins. A couple of years in a row, 91 and 92. It's nice to have on a CV. Where are the rings, Pierre? Where are the rings?
They're in my house.
In a safe?
No. Great to see you, Tony. No, they're not.
Nice to see you too.
But the Stanley Cups are actually up at Tremblant.
Oh, that's right, because you get kind of like mini cups. Is that right? Everyone gets like a mini cup?
Yeah. So that's neat.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Pierre, you know what? I'd be remiss if I don't ask you about the draft, but did it round one pretty much go the way you expected?
Yeah, pretty much. I thought it would be really lacking in fluidity after the first pick. You know, obviously everybody knew who was going number one, Macklin Celebrini, and then it kind of went off a little bit. I thought Chicago would go defense. They did with Lefshunov. And then obviously things kind of went off the rails with Anaheim's pick, and then it just became a cluster. I thought the first 11 to 12 picks would kind of go with the same guys that went. The only guy that I think missed in there was Cole Yzerman. He went at 20 to the Islanders, Tony. I think Montreal got a real good pick at 21. That kid's a really talented kid. I think he's got a chance to be a really good player. I'm not saying he's as good as Max Pacioretty, Tony, but there's some similarities to Pacioretty and to the way the kid plays. But no, the draft one pretty much.
Pardon me, Pierre. Even though they played different positions, you're able to make that comparable?
Yeah, saw Max a lot when he was a kid growing up. I saw Max play a lot. Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities. He's gonna. The one thing you need to know, it's hard to be an 18-year-old and play college hockey. It's really hard to be 18 and play and put points up. There are not a lot of guys who can do it. I use Brady Tkachuk all the time. Brady had 8 goals his first year in college. He had 23 his first year at the NHL. That was 1 year later. It's really hard to score goals in college. We'll see how he does. You know,
why, Pierre? Why?
Because you're young and you're playing against 22, 23, 24-year-old guys, and everybody's got one full week to prepare for a game. So they break down tendencies. Most of the coaches really overcoach the game. You can't scout like that in the NHL till you get to the playoffs.
You're right. You can't scout like that, but you're still a young NHLer at 18 or 19 playing against 30s and 33s.
Yeah, there's no question. But those guys aren't as fast at 30 and 33.
You're right.
You're right. College game is unbelievably fast. So is major junior, by the way. They're equal in terms of speed. The one thing that's interesting, major junior guys are over at 20, some of them. College guys are just starting at 20, most of them. So when you're 18, it's hard to score. It's really hard to score in college hockey.
Pierre, a couple of months ago, more than a couple of months ago, I think it was St. Patty's weekend in Montreal. You were doing a show from there, and I think you took questions from the viewers who were watching, and someone said, who should the Canadiens target? And you said, without a second's hesitation, they should target Cole Yzerman. Mm-hmm. 1 year ago, Cole Yzerman was talked about being in the top 3. Mm-hmm. 1 year later, you get to the draft, he's selected 20th overall. Mm-hmm. Every year, there seems to be a player that slips more than most. Zeev Bouillon slipped this year, but Yzerman's the one who slipped the most. When Cole Caulfield was drafted 15th by the Canadiens, Marc Bergevin asked Pat Brisson, told him, I'd like to take Cole out for supper. And Pat said, don't waste your time. Cole's going top 10. He slipped to 15. The Canadiens drafted him. From the outside, my opinion would be that Yzerman slipped for the same reasons that Cole Caulfield slipped, and that is, mind you, Caulfield's small. But one of the reasons would be a lot of people doubt his ability to impact the game if he doesn't score. Do you think that's the reason why he dipped or he slipped to 20? And if so, what do you say to that?
I think that's one of the reasons why he slipped. I'm not sure his interviews were great. I think he might have turned some people off in his interviews. If you look at some of the things he said after he got drafted by the Islanders, one of the things that he said that I found shocking, and I bet you he got brought in after that. He said, well, this is how I play, and I play a different way. I'm paraphrasing here. And I like to do it my way. And the Islanders like that. I'm not sure the head honcho of the Islanders likes him saying that in public. I think he'll change his tune. But I would just say this. He can, at this point in his career, cannot affect the outcome of a game if he's not scoring because he's not good enough defensively.
You know, it's funny you say that because Nick Babrov brought it up a couple of times that one of the things that they loved about Demidov was a confidence that wasn't an arrogance. And sometimes players have a certain way of saying things, and that confidence comes across as an arrogance. And who knows if maybe that's what they thought of Cole Yzerman too.
I was told that from people that had interviewed him. I have no problem with that. One of the best interviews I ever had turned out to be a player that was drafted in the first round by the Edmonton Oilers, Tyler Wright. And he's still scouting. He's a very successful scout, but he played for Swift Current. His character was unimpeachable, Tony. He was an amazing interview, strong guy, strong moral fiber, really good hockey player. He turned out to be an adequate NHL player. He was not a superstar. In that draft, we took Marcus Naslund, and Marcus hardly spoke. He's an amazing character guy. So you got to be careful. And I learned that from that interview. It's not that I didn't like Tyler Wright as a player. I did. But what I really liked about Tyler Wright was how he interviewed. He interviewed unbelievably. So you got to be careful. And that was one of my lessons. So I was never afraid. I took one of my scouting friends who really liked Cole Yzerman as a player said, Pierre, it's kind of hard in the interview process. I said, and I told him the story that I just told you. I said, you got to be careful on that. You got to be really careful.
All right. So look, the Canadiens by all means are happy with the player that they got at 21. I reported from Vegas that the second I got there, I heard how much they love this player. And I said, once they made the deal, don't be surprised if this is the guy that they're going to choose should he be available. And they chose him. Having said that, do you think, or based on what you hear, or based on what you know, or based on your opinion of Yzerman, the second they heard, and they had the 21st pick, the second that they heard Yzerman picked at 20, you think they were disappointed?
I don't know that. Yeah. What I would say is they got the player they wanted at 21. You know, maybe they thought Yzerman could have slipped to 21. Then they would have said Yzerman was a player we wanted. But I would never demean the 21st pick and Michael Hage, the kid that's drafted by Montreal. I'd never demean him because I think he's actually a really good pick.
Yeah.
Do I think Yzerman would have been better offensively early? Probably. It's going to be interesting because I'm not sure if Celebrini's going back to BU or not. I just don't know. I don't think anybody really knows. Most people think he's going to turn pro, but he hadn't said that yet. Like, I know for a fact, Ryan Leonard, who's at Boston College, he's not going back to Washington. He's in their camp right now. He's going back to Boston College. He'll sign with Washington after the season. He's gone public and said that. I don't know where Celebrini's at, but if Celebrini's back and Yzerman plays with him, you should have seen those two guys play at Shattuck St. Mary's together.
Yeah.
They shredded it. They ripped it up.
Pierre, once again, the Canadiens are really happy with the way things turned out. It was earlier in the day on Friday. It was in the morning that they made a deal where they traded their 26th pick 57, and pick 198 to the Los Angeles Kings, who, by the way, the only two teams that were staying at the Hotel Fontainebleau were the Canadiens and the Kings. So who knows if they crossed paths in the coffee shop and maybe ironed it out there. But in return, they got LA's 21st pick. Once again, everyone's happy it turned out well. But the second it happened, one of the first things that came to my mind was, wouldn't you want to try and pull off this trade once you're on the floor to see how the draft is going, to see whether or not you've identified a player? And then the only thing that I thought about at that point was they must have 4 players that they probably really like, and they probably said to themselves, let's take the deal while it's there, because even if we don't get our first pick, we'll get our second. If we don't get our second, we'll get our third, and we'll be happy with that. Talk to us about how that goes down. Don't you usually see how things go on the floor? And does my reasoning make any sense here?
The second part of your reasoning makes a ton of sense. So they probably had 4 players that they thought would go between 20 and 24, 25. They probably did. That's usually – so what goes into building a list, and this is the most key component of managing a draft table, you build your list over the course of the year. So you'll have an early list, then you'll have a mid-season list, then you'll have an end-of-the-year list, then you'll have another list that you'll build off of after the combine and the interviews. So basically, usually, every team's a little different, but usually there are 4 lists that you prepare. And over the course of that year, you can really narrow it down in terms of where guys are going to fit. Now, sometimes guys' lists are crazy because guys have overinflated opinions of different players. But that's usually how the list is prepared. Now, your reasoning, I thought the second part of it was good. They probably had those 4 or 5 players circle and say, okay, worst case scenario, we're going to get number 5, who we don't mind. Best case scenario, we're going to get, let's just say for the sake of argument, we're going to get Yzerman, you know? Now, I don't know how they knew he was slipping that bad because nobody knew. And you just nailed it before, Tony. I want to give you credit. William, I was flabbergasted that he slipped that much. I couldn't believe it. And I'll tell you why. I saw Denver play a whack of games, not 1 or 2. I saw him play a ton of games. And my partner, Jimmy Murphy, I brought Jimmy to a game in Springfield, Mass, the NCAA tournament. And I said, watch this guy. And he watched him. I said, see that, see that, see that. There were like 4 or 5 plays he made. I said, he's not that far removed from being an NHL player. And I was showing Jimmy why he is, so positive, this player, in terms of being an NHL prospect. I was surprised by him dropping, and I was really surprised by Yzerman dropping.
So I caught up with several prospects on the Wednesday. They were on the ice with members of the NHL Player Inclusion Coalition, and they were putting on a hockey clinic for young hockey players aged between 5 and 10 in Vegas, Nevada. And Macklin Celebrini was on the ice, and Artem Levshinov was on the ice, and Zane Perek was on the ice, TJ Ginla was on the ice, and Zeev Buium was on the ice. And once they got off the ice, we had a chance to interview all of them in a scrum format. And I went up to Zeev Buium and I said, everyone's talking about 7 or 8 defensemen. Those 7 or 8 defensemen, I would imagine you all believe, each and every one of you, that you're the best defenseman in the draft. So I said, I'm asking you, why are you the best defenseman in the draft? He looked at me without a second's hesitation and he said, I'll tell you why I'm the best defenseman in the draft. Because I have a winning pedigree. I won 3 championships this year. Yes, I play with good players. And yes, I played on good teams. But I believe a lot of that has to do with the winning culture that I bring, the fact that I know how to win, and the way I play is a way that I play that's very efficient, which my teams end up having success. I thought it was incredibly confident. But now after everything we're saying, I wonder if that speech turned off the interviewers.
I think it probably did. Some guys, not all of them, but I would say some guys probably say, whoa, wait a second. We know Denver's team. What about Matt Anderson? What about Massimo Rizzo? You know, there are a lot of good players at Denver. There's not just you. And so you might not be onto something. But that being said, I can just tell you right now, that young man's a really good player.
I believe you when you say that. I believe when you. By the way, here's a little tidbit on Cole Yzerman. He interviewed with the Canadiens on the Thursday, the day before the draft. Yeah. He interviewed with them, and so, you know, why do you? If they knew he wasn't going to be their pick at 5, you think they interviewed him because they knew they were going to end up making a trade to get 20 or 21, and said, you know what? Let's see if this guy's possible. If he can be our pick.
Here's one other thing I want to say. I don't think there's any way they knew that they were getting the Russian at 5. Demidov. I don't think they knew that. It's unless somebody from another organization was leaking stuff to them. I don't know how they knew that, because a lot of guys I talked to said he's going to Chicago at 2 because they want to have him and Connor Bedard play together. They want those guys to ignite the way Kane and Taves did. I'm just telling you what people were telling me.
I think they thought that too, Pierre, because when we met with Jeff Gordon on the Thursday, he said Chicago's pick will dictate the draft.
Well, 100%. And that's what we just talked about when the show started. Yeah. So I agree with that. 100. I mean, that was the biggest thing, that if they took forward, then it becomes a defense draft. If they take defense, then it becomes a forward draft. And Bouillon probably slides. And he did. So, you know, Ottawa had a chance to take a D-man. They chose to go in a different direction. They took a Western Canadian kid who plays major junior hockey, and he's a good player. So everybody kind of had their own flavor, and that's why it was such an unpredictable draft.
The Canadiens are such a conservative organization, though, Pierre, or historically they have been. I left Vegas being very surprised at how outspoken they were about them saying that they believe they didn't only hit a home run with Demidov, they believe they hit a grand slam. Marty Lapointe said, we got the steal of the draft. Nick Bobrov was asked if Demidov's a future superstar in the making, and he said, this is an understatement. And they both admitted that he would have been their pick at 2. Now, I don't expect them to come out to say otherwise, but I am a little bit surprised of how much they made their feelings known. I mean,
Tony, this kid's special. He really is. I don't think he's as good as Celebrini. And the only reason I say that, Macklin did something that very few guys done. He won the Hobey Bakers, a 17-year-old. That's the Heisman Trophy for college hockey. And you look at, you know, Paul Correa won it as a freshman. Jack Eichel won it as a freshman. There are not a lot of guys, first-year players, that are winning that thing and not going on a superstardom in the end. I'm just telling you, it's really hard to win. And to do it as a 17-year-old is mind-shattering. Macklin, to me, is Jonathan Taves with more offense. And if Jonathan's watching this or if somebody reports it to him, I say this with all due respect. I think Macklin's a better pure offensive player than Jonathan. I don't think Macklin is a complete player like Jonathan was. He's trending there, but he's not as good as Jonathan was that way.
Yeah.
There's different parts of it.
It was day 2 on the ice at Habs development camp earlier today in Brossard. And there's a few things that came out of it. But Pierre, one of the things that caught my attention happened early this morning, as a matter of fact, where the Laval Rocket, who are looking for a head coach, because JF Houle, who signed on with Laval about a month ago, well, about 10 days after he signed on, give or take, actually asked permission to speak to his alma mater, who wanted to speak to him, Clarkson,
Yep.
And he ended up accepting a job with Clarkson. He ended up leaving the Laval Rocket. So they're without a coach. So the announcement comes in from the Rocket this morning, and they hired an assistant coach. Daniel Jacob, appointed assistant coach with the Rocket. Now, Pierre, logic is you name your head coach first. And obviously, the Canadiens are a lot smarter than I am, so I don't have to tell them this because they already know. But would this hiring lead you to believe that they've already identified who is going to be next and probably asked their opinion on this assistant coach? I mean, what does this say to you?
Or it's a young kid that's a really good coach, and they don't want to lose him, and they want to make sure he's part of the brand. He's part of being in the organization. That happens more than you think. You know, you say, okay, we really like this guy. We think he's good. We think he's up and coming. He's not going to have a huge profile job. He's going to slowly break his way in. And so sometimes, you know, Tony, I'm not going to say it because it was me, but that's what happened to me. You know, that's how I got in the National Hockey League. And so it happens. It happens a lot more than you think. So though I don't know who they're going to hire in Laval, I do know that it's an important hire because they got a lot of really good prospects there.
Who would you hire?
I think about Pascal Vincent. I think he'd be a guy that definitely would be on my radar screen. I think about Dean Evison. He'd be somebody that would definitely be on my radar screen. I would have brought up Jack Capuano's name, but Jack is gone to Minnesota to be the assistant coach to Johnny Hines, and that's a relationship that's really started at the World Championships this year over in Czechia. But
yeah, I get the feeling they're going to hire a francophone. So my question to you is, how important or not would it be in this market? We know that the head coach is an extreme importance of the Canadiens, but how important do the Canadiens have an obligation to look in their backyard?
Yes, absolutely. I said this to Jeff Molson when I interviewed for the GM's job, probably the third or fourth time I had talked to Jeff and his group about how important it was to make sure you dominate the province of Quebec with players, with coaches, with scouts, with management people. I think it's really important. The answer is yes. Doesn't mean that you cancel out everybody else, but those people should get an opportunity. Now, they do great in Laval. Like, they're doing unbelievable numbers. I'm mesmerized by the attendance there. They should be so proud of the brand they've built there and the people running it. It's just spectacular.
It's a beautiful arena too, by the way.
Magnificent. I agree with you. So, I've known Pascal a long time. When he was running Montreal Rockets, Montreal Juniors, I should say. Yeah. I used to go and do practices for him. You know, when I'd be in Montreal, and I'd go down there and skate with his group and run some practices for him. I think the world of him. I really do.
Jake Allen played on that team. So did Angelo Esposito.
Yes, they did. You are correct, sir.
Yeah. Would Pascal Vincent go back to the American Hockey League? It seems to me he paid his dues there.
He did, but here's the one thing I'd say. I would look, if I were advising him, I'd say, Alain Vigneault went back to Major Junior after he got fired by the Montreal Canadiens. And then he went to the Manitoba Moose. And then he went to Vancouver. So, and they were really hesitant in Vancouver to hire him. I can tell you that. But he did a great job. So you can see sometimes you got to take a step back to take, 2 steps or 3 steps forward. I still think he's a really good coach. I really do, and I like him a lot. And I can tell you, Mark Recchi's one of my dear friends, as you know.
Yes. Yeah.
Mark worked for Pascal and has nothing but great things to say about him.
Yeah, I would probably even say to Pascal, if you're ever going to coach again in the National Hockey League, you probably have a better shot of doing it in Montreal one day down the line than you probably would another team. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is. I mean,
not in the short term, of course.
No, I know what you're saying. You'd like to think that people aren't that provincial in their hiring, but yeah, you could be right about that. You could be right.
All right. Okay. Speaking of Canadiens development camp, a lot of goalies there, one of which is Jacob Fowler. We know you're the president of the fan club, rightfully so. But Conte Miller, look at this. Conte Miller says, Je sais que je peux être meilleur que Jacob Fowler et Jakob Dobeš, mais oui, je les regarde jouer et cela me sert de motivation. I know I can be better than Fowler and Dobeš, but yeah, I look at them play and it motivates me. How good is he going to have to be better than Jacob Fowler?
Really good. He's going to have to be really, really good. Doesn't mean he can't do it. I love kids that say that. See, now some people would get turned off by that. I wouldn't be. I like that. You know,
how about the kid who was drafted by your buddy Bill Guerin in Minnesota? Who goes up to the draft? Who goes up to Bill Guerin and says, "You just got the steal of the draft in the 4th round. I promise you that." And Bill Guerin looks at him. I love Guerin's answer too, by the way. He looks at him and says, "Thanks, man. I know we did." Isn't that something? It's a beautiful moment, actually.
They're all. You know what? Some of these kids are really scripted through their agents, and other ones just go out there and let it fly. I told you the story about, you know, the beginning with Wright, Tyler Wright. All I can say is this: as long as you can play and you're not disrespectful, that's okay. If you can play and you're disrespectful, that's a problem. I'm gonna give you a great story, Tony. It's really fast. Jerry York is in the Hockey Hall of Fame. He's one of the iconic coaches in U.S. college hockey.
Yeah,
he's over 1,000 wins. Nobody's got more wins than him. He's a Scotty Bowman of U.S. college hockey. So I used to speak to his team every other year or every 3 years. And one year I asked him, I said, "Coach, you got a real good team going here." I said, "What's your key to your recruiting?" Because I had a certain way that I recruit him. How do you guys recruit? He goes, "I much prefer to have a good player who's a great person than a great player who's a bad person." So I said, "Why is that?" And he said, "Because the great person who's a good player will listen to me. The great player who's a bad person isn't coachable." Makes sense.
That's great. That's great.
Makes sense.
And you know what? There's a couple of Montreal Canadiens that he coached are pretty good people. Michael Matheson and Alex Newhook are two names.
Yeah, they're both really high-profile kids. And I can tell you right now, Michael Matheson, you can ask Michael about this. Michael Matheson went back for his 4th year at Boston College because of the way Jerry York treated him and the way they named him captain and the way he was perceived in the organization. Michael's a tremendous person. Tremendous person.
Amazing stuff. Pierre, the Montreal Canadiens, you would think, and you would still think, that they're going to go out and they're going to try and get help on their second line. They want to accelerate this rebuild. They've identified there's an opening on the second line. Who knows, maybe even 2 openings on the second line. Yeah. And the past couple of years on trade deadline day, they made a couple of moves. They traded for Alex Newhook last year, and they traded for Kirby Dach the year before. Mm-hmm. A couple of days ago was the NHL draft, and unfortunately, they weren't able to make a trade in terms of bringing in a player to help them right away. Mm-hmm. We know the players that have gone in free agency, but there's a couple of names that are still out there that are tied to the Canadiens, but who still haven't moved. Yep. Martin Necas is one, Trevor Zegras is another, and Rutger McGroarty is another. So if you could go in aggressive on one more than the other, who would it be and why?
Necas, because he's established and he's a pure point producer. He's got world-class speed, and he's definitely suited as a second-line player, not a first-line player, but he's an elite second-line player. McGroarty is more of a character, in-your-face, he'll get it done kind of a player. Zegras is a slickster. So Zegras, if he's not scoring, he's not helping you win at all. He's a toe dragger. Don't get me wrong, I've known Trevor a long time. Think he's really talented. But you asked me this before, and I'd say there are other guys that I think Montreal needs before they have Trevor Zegras.
All right. And Necas is a center or a winger? Because I believe he was drafted as a center.
He's a winger. I think he's a winger. And the reason why I think that is his speed is so elite. You don't want him wasting that speed defending down low. Keep him up high and have him stretch the zones. He's not playing the wings, not a foreign concept to him. He's probably more comfortable playing there.
Okay. He's not the player that he used to be, but I want to bring up this player's hockey DB, and I'm talking about Vladimir Tarasenko.
Yep.
Who was signed earlier today by the Detroit Red Wings.
Yep.
He's a right winger who shoots left. He can play either side. He's 32 years old. And we signed a 2-year deal at $4.75 million per season. Pierre, last season in the National Hockey League between two teams, Ottawa and Florida, he scored 23 goals.
Yeah.
The year before that, in an off season in 69 games, he scored 18 goals. But the year before that, he scored 34 goals. This is a guy who has had seasons of 37, 40, 39, 33 a couple of times, and yes, 34, and I get it. He's probably not the player that he used to be, but he can still score goals.
Yeah, you can.
Did the Canadiens miss out on an opportunity here? Because we heard they were willing to offer Jonathan Marchessault, who's, I think, a year older, a 3-year deal, but you lose out on Tarasenko. I don't know if they were interested or not, but I think 2 years at 4.75, I think it's something that would make a lot of sense for the Canadiens, or would have.
It might have. Here's the one thing I would caution you on, Tony, with Vladdy, and I've known Vladdy a long time. First time I really saw him play in a high-profile event was a 2011 World Junior in Buffalo, New York. He played on a line with Kuznetsov and Panarin, and they're the ones that engineered the comeback against Canada in the third period of that game. They were unbelievable, but Tarasenko was a driver of that line. Kuznetsov was good, Panarin was good, but Tarasenko was a guy that really made stuff happen. So I've got a long history of watching him and speaking with him. Something happened in Ottawa. They were in too big a rush to get him out of there. Something happened. I can tell you. I was really tight with the coaches there, the old coaching staff. And I don't know what happened. And I don't know.
It doesn't look like he disrupted the locker room in Florida, though.
He did not. He definitely did not. And I can tell you this right now. I don't know. Maybe he's more comfortable being in the United States. I don't know. But I can tell you that Montreal wasn't the only team that was interested in Tarasenko. The New York Rangers were too. And they had him before.
Yeah.
Well, you're not wrong on thinking he could help. But I just want you to understand. I just want to be transparent. There was something that went down in Ottawa, and I don't know what it was, but they were not they were in a pretty good mood to move him.
Okay. Pierre, history was made in the National Hockey League today, and it's the Seattle Kraken that made that history. And, of course, Jessica Campbell, because she was hired as an assistant coach, which makes her the first woman in NHL history to be behind the bench. We saw this coming. It's probably long overdue. But, Pierre, we know the National Hockey League is a conservative league, and we know it's an old boys network. I think this is very refreshing for so many people, and so many women now can dream of being behind the bench in the National Hockey League. Having said that, A, are you surprised? And B, what do you think of the hire?
No, not surprised at all. I talked to Ronnie Francis last week at the Hockey Hall of Fame meetings, and you kind of got a sense that with Danny Bilesma coming up from Coachella Valley and Jessica being, one of his top assistants. The other assistant there is Stu Bickle, by the way, the former New York Ranger defenseman, tough guy. You kind of got the feeling that Jessica would go up. She checks a lot of boxes. My son played junior hockey in British Columbia for Penticton V's, one of the top teams in the country. And it was during COVID. And so the Western Hockey League was shut down, but the BCHL was not. And Jessica ran a bunch of practices and skill development for those players that were there. So you had guys from Kelowna, you had guys from Kamloops, you had guys from Vernon, you had guys from Penticton. You had a lot of good players coming into Penticton to skate. And Jessica was running the skates. My son called me up and said, Dad, she's a really good power skating coach. She has command on the ice. She's eventually going to be a good coach. That's what my son told me. And that's from a 18-year-old kid. How many 18-year-old males are going to be receptive to female coaching? You wouldn't think so, but they all were. They all were. And so that speaks about, where she is in her career. But she's going to – here's the biggest adjustment. It's the travel. It's the time zone travel. It's being prepared. And I don't know what role they're going to create for her. But if she adapts the way I believe she's going to adapt, then this will lead to more women being hired. No question. Speaking
of hiring and speaking of assistant coaches, yesterday we found out that Alex Burrows would not be back as a coach for the Canadiens. Instead, he's going to be serving as a consultant to the management team and serving as a consultant to the coaching staff. By the way, that was also welcomed with another hire by the Montreal Canadiens, who hired former NHL player Lori Korpakowski to be part of their development team based out of Europe.
Yep.
But with Burrows wanting to step aside because he wants to spend more time with his family and the travel was just a little bit too much, there's an opening. And I guess I don't have to ask you again because I asked you about a month ago, would you add an experienced assistant coach to the Canadian staff? And you said Gerard Gallant. I would imagine 1 month later, you haven't changed your opinion?
No, it'd be Dean Evison, Gerard Gallant, guys that have been around. Guys that run benches, they've been assistant coaches. They're not going to overstep their bounds. They're going to stay in their lane. They're going to provide unbelievable information. I think it's really important. Doesn't mean that coach has to be on the bench, by the way. The coach can be upstairs and have just as big an impact as if they were on the bench. One of the things that has to happen in the NHL today that didn't always have to happen when I was coaching it, but has to happen now, you have to have a staff that makes players better, because there are a lot of young guys being rushed into the league, which they weren't when I was coaching. I can tell you, they just weren't. But now they are because of the salary cap. It's cheaper labor. So you got to make guys better. And if you don't make guys better as a staff, then you're not going to be around very long. And that's why I think you need an experienced guy to work with players.
Pierre, thoroughly enjoyed this, as I always do. Thanks so much for making time for me tonight on the Sick Podcast. I appreciate it.
Tony, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Glad you're back from Vegas, safe and sound.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, and I didn't lose the house. It's always a good thing. Thanks, Pierre. Have a good one.
You got it. Yeah.
There you have it. Hey, special thanks to all of you watching and all of you, of course, who will be listening on all social media channels. And special thanks to our partners. Energy Transportation Group is one. Bittt, the Tibi is another. Playground is another. And, of course, Betway, who we brought you our NHL draft coverage 2024 as well. We have new merchandise that's out that you can acquire. Our Sick apparel. Take a look at this. The future starts now. Future starts now in the colors of red, white, and blue for Sick. Now available on sickattire.com. I want to thank all of you for watching. I want to thank all of you once again for sharing. If you like it, comment Sick, S-I-C-K, share it with your friends, and leave us a 5-star review on Apple. It's our way of feeling the love. For Shane Gomo and Master Control, have a good night. I'm Marinaro.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Tony Marinaro on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. The Sick Podcast is brought to you by Energy Transportation Group, driven to be different. LaBeat.tb, embrace your true nature. And Playground, your premier gaming destination.